Hey guys, it's Miss Birds here, and today we are going over 1-point perspective. Now, for today's lesson, you're going to want to make sure that you have a sheet of paper. If you don't have any plain white copy paper, you can use a piece of notebook paper. It really doesn't matter what kind of paper you're using, just as long as you have something to draw on. Okay, you're going to want to have a pencil with an eraser, and you'll want to make sure that you have a ruler with you. If you were able to pick up your supplies packet, you should already have a ruler in there. If for some reason you were not able to pick up your supplies packet, you can always use something like a small notebook, the edge of a notebook, because you're going to want to make sure that you have something to make straight lines, okay? So with that being said, we are going to start, and we're going to take our ruler, and the first thing that we're going to do with 1-point perspective is we're going to create a horizon line, okay? And the horizon line is essentially where the sky meets the land in your drawing. We are going to create our horizon line pretty much in the center of our paper, and just so you guys know, I have my paper horizontal, so it's going side to side, not vertical, up and down. You can do vertical if you want, but for the sake of 1-point perspective, I always like to have my paper horizontal. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to lay it flat on my paper. And I know you guys can't see, but on my little stand that I have here, it's kind of like raised up a bit. So that's why I have this area here where the ruler's not being pushed down all the way. But I'm gonna find about midway into my paper, and I'm just going to create a nice straight line. Okay, don't push down too hard on the pencil. We want to be able to erase it and not see the line. Okay, so make sure that you're not pushing down too hard, but just hard enough to make that line on your paper. Okay, and this is our horizon line. Okay, again, your horizon line is where the sky of our drawing is going to meet the land of our drawing. Okay, you don't have to label it on your paper. I'm just labeling it so you guys can have the correct terminology and will know what I'm talking about when I use these terms. So after we create the horizon line, we want to go through and we want to create the vanishing point. Now, the vanishing point is just going to be a small dot that we place on our horizon line. Okay, you can put the vanishing point wherever you'd like, but I'm going to put mine in the center. Okay, we're just going to do a very small dot. Again, you want it to be able to be erased out after the fact, because you don't want people to see that you're using a vanishing point when your drawing is completely finished. So one of the most important things that you have to learn when you start drawing is to draw lightly. Okay, some people, they just want to push down really, really hard on the paper. But the problem with that is that when you go back to erase those lines, you're still going to see a mark. So we want to practice just very lightly putting in those lines, okay? So this is our vanishing point. And the vanishing point is very important because that's where all of our lines are going to go back to. Okay, so all of our lines that we create are going to go back to that vanishing point. And that's what's going to make it look like they're in perspective, okay? Like there's a large amount of space going on. So I told you guys before that we went over 4 different elements of design. We went over line, we went over shape, we went over form, and we went over value. So far, we've created line, okay? And right now, we're gonna create a shape, okay? And the shape that we're gonna be using is a square or a rectangle, okay? So I'm going to use my ruler, okay? Because remember, anytime we want a straight edge, we always wanna make sure we use our ruler. And I am just gonna go ahead and draw out my rectangle. Okay, the ruler is only as good as the artist, so make sure when you're using a ruler that we don't have it sideways, but that we have it going nice and straight, okay, so that the 2 lines are parallel right next to each other. And I'm gonna close up my shape here with my ruler to create my rectangle. Okay, now we're gonna be drawing probably a couple rectangles on this page, so we don't wanna do it too big, but large enough to where we can see it, okay? So we have line and we have shape, and we're gonna put in some more lines. Now, this is where the vanishing point is very, very important. So all of our corners and all of the lines that we're taking from our corners are gonna go back to that vanishing point. And when we do that, it's gonna look like they're going back into space, okay? So I'm going to take my ruler, again, always with our ruler or your straight edge, whatever you're using, and I'm going to line up my ruler so that it matches the corner of the shape and goes back to the vanishing point, okay? Now I'm gonna create a line from that corner to my vanishing point, but I'm gonna draw it very lightly, okay? Because eventually some of this line will get erased. So I don't wanna draw it too dark, okay? But just dark enough to where I can see it on my paper. Okay, so it's going from one corner to the vanishing point. And we're gonna do that with all of the corners of this shape, okay? So again, I'm taking from the corner of my object and creating a line back to my vanishing point. Okay, the corner of my object back to my vanishing point. And last but not least, I want to make sure that I also do it on this edge too. Otherwise, you probably won't see it very well. Okay, so again, from the very corner of my shape back to the vanishing point. All right, now, these lines are pretty close together, and that's okay. That's not that big of a deal. No worries. Okay, so now what we want to do is we've created lines that are going back to our vanishing point, and now we want to create lines to make it look more like a box. Okay, so we are going to make sure that our ruler is parallel with this line here. Okay, so this is a vertical line from the side of our box, and we want to make sure that our ruler is also going vertical and is parallel, right? Meaning that the lines are next to each other, going in the same position. So I want to make sure that my ruler is parallel to this line. Now, if I want a shorter box, I will create my line closer to the edge. And if I want it to look like a really long rectangle, I'll put it further away. Okay, so it is up to you how large you want to make your box look. I'm going to stay about right here. Again, making sure that my ruler lines up straight with this line here. And I'm going to put in that line. All right, and then I want to make sure that my ruler is parallel with this line. So I'm going to put my ruler so that it is parallel. And I want to make sure that this top line connects from where this line ended. Okay, so it's ending right here, right at that point. And I want to move it over to this line here. Actually, it could be put down a little bit more. I'm going to go in and put it down to the side there. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to erase out the unnecessary lines, right? So the lines that I don't need anymore. So I want to be able to see my box. I'm going to erase that line. Oop, and I accidentally erased too much, so I'm going to go in, fill that part again. I guess we really didn't need this line that goes back. Okay. You would need that line if you want to make the box look like it's see-through. So if we wanted to, we could have kept that line and we could have attached this line going back here. Like if I had my ruler parallel to this line, right? It would look more like a cube, but For this demonstration, that really doesn't matter so much. That's pretty much just if you want it to look like that. I want my box to look solid, not see-through, so I'm going to erase those lines. But if you did want your box to look see-through, you could put those lines in, right? And the important thing when you're putting in those additional lines is just to make sure that they're parallel, right? Parallel, so if your line is straight here, then the line over here should be straight. If this line is horizontal here, then the line up here should also be horizontal, okay? And I'm gonna go in and erase out my lines going back to my vanishing point. Okay, now no matter what position you have your box or where you'd like to create it, all of the lines will go back to the vanishing point. Okay, so even if I started the box really low over here, all of my lines would have to go back to that vanishing point. And the same thing if I drew it up top. So I'm going to give you an example of drawing from up top and then using your vanishing point to go to the bottom. Okay, so typically when we're drawing in perspective, for the most part, we would have our boxes in front of our horizon line, right? So you could see like the sunset or whatever's going on in the background. If you want boxes to look like they're floating in the air, then you would want to go in the sky, which would be above the horizon line, right? Above the horizon line. But everything's still going to be going back to that vanishing point, right? That vanishing point that we created there. So I'm going to start again by creating, if I can get my ruler up, by creating a small square, okay, above my horizon line. It does not matter how far above the horizon line you go, but I'm gonna go ahead and start putting my box in right here. Okay, again, you want to make sure that your ruler is nice and straight, that you're creating nice straight lines. All right, there we go. So I've created my box. It is above my horizon line. Remember that horizon line is that line that's cutting in the center of our paper. So we want to be above that. Now all of our lines, just like we did before, okay, are gonna go back to this vanishing point. So we're gonna do it from all of the corners, right? So I'm gonna line my ruler up with the edge or the corner of my box, and I'm gonna go back to that vanishing point. Okay, again, remember, we want the lines to be light enough so that we can go back and erase, because just like this box, we erased a lot of those lines that were going back to the vanishing point, right? If I draw my line way too dark, and if I push down too hard on the pencil and I go to erase, look what happens. I still have that line, right? Which we don't want to see. So a lot of the times when we're first starting to draw, we push down really, really hard. But keep in mind, you don't want to put too much pressure down on the pencil, right? You want a nice light line so that you can go back and erase. Okay, so continuing on, I'm just going to take from my other corners and go back to my vanishing point. Here. Okay, so everything recedes back or goes back to that vanishing point. And my line looks a little off there because I'm working on this little stand. So I'm just gonna move my paper over slightly so it's not on that stand anymore, so I can get a nice clean line. There we go, it's a little bit better. All right, and I'm not gonna forget this little corner that's hidden over here. Going back there, okay? So remember, our next step after we create our lines going back to our vanishing point is to create our parallel lines, okay? Now, when we created this box, it looks like we can see on top of the box, right? So I can see the top of the box. I can't see the top of the box here because the way it's above the horizon line, which means we're gonna be able to see the bottom of the box, not the top of the box, okay? So if you wanna be able to see the top, you wanna make sure that you're creating something that's under the horizon line. If you want to be able to see the bottom, you want to create something that's above that horizon line, okay? So I'm going to go through and I'm going to take my ruler, make sure my lines are parallel. Remember, you can make the lines as wide as you want, right? If I wanted a really long rectangle, I could put my line down here. If I want something that looks more like a cube, right? So something that has equal sides, we'll go here. So making sure that my ruler is parallel with this line. Okay, now I need to make my line going in between these. So I'm going to switch my ruler to be parallel, right? We always want it to be parallel with the lines. And I'm gonna move it over so that it meets where this line has ended and go straight up. All right. And at this point, I can go through and erase out the lines that are going back to my vanishing point. Hoping that I drew them light enough so that we can't see them. And sometimes I have to draw a little bit darker just for the sake of the demonstration so you guys can see it easier. But for you guys, you want to make sure that you're always drawing your lines really lightly so that you can go back, oops, sorry, so you can go back and erase. It's my computer. Okay, so I'm going to erase out those lines. And there you have it. Those, that is how you draw boxes in 1 point perspective, right? So we have 1 point, one vanishing point, and we've created perspective. So it looks like these boxes are going back in space or kind of floating, if you will, in space. So your assignment for today is to not only finish and complete this demonstration, but I want you to draw 3 more boxes, okay? So I want you to draw a box that is down here, another box that is up here, okay? So one underneath the horizon line, one above the horizon line, and then you can put the third box wherever you'd like. And that is your assignment today. I hope you enjoyed 1 point perspective.